Now, as I build these body panels, two notes. First of all, we don't need to do the left side. Don't bother with that yet. We can do that later, and it's really a waste of time to do it at the same time. We should really just do half and then move on. Secondly, even though it would be easy to join this edge to this edge, and kind of just make this one continuous smooth seam, actually, it's kind of nice to leave them separate for various reasons. If we head over to our reference image again, we do have these sort of rivet strips that come across and connect to these panels, which means they don't need to be smooth, continuous chunks of geometry. That being the case, there's no reason to go to the time and energy of connecting them. Not only that, but these give us convenient places to select a chunk of geometry and use it for UV mapping or whatever. So really keeping these separate is not a terrible way to go. And finally, the next thing to do would be to add the cockpit edge loop. Just like before, when we did this retopology process one other time to create the cockpit in the first place, it's much easier to model everything else if you start with the loops. Start with the loops and then fill in everything else. That's just by far the easiest way to go. And we've already done that work once. So let's go select this other mesh item. Just select some of these polys that we want. I'll just get this half here. Then I'm going to Control-C to copy those, and then go back to our body panel mesh and Control-V to paste those in. Now I don't have to redo that work. Now this stuff is not smooth over here. Notice this is faceted geometry. This is smooth geometry. We want these to match up. So let's double-click this and hit the Tab key so that it's just faceted. And then jump in here and do some topology pen work. Now, things might start snapping a little funny depending on your other geometry. Usually zooming in will help that a little bit, or just moving your view around. If you're having trouble, try moving your view around a little bit, because sometimes that's all it takes. It just kind of depends on where your view is and where your work plane is and stuff, and sometimes if you just move things around, it'll jog it to where it works the way it should. There we go. That looks pretty good. I just want to adjust this ever so slightly, so that we're inside here. Just going to make things work a little better. And by work a little better, I just mean that the background snapping works better if all the vertices are on the underlying surface and not outside of it. Okay, so that's the sort of the shape we're going for, and let me double check our reference here. This is not the best angle, so again, just go to Google and take a look. There we go. That's a slightly better view. You can see how this just kind of butts up here, and then comes up and goes forward and comes to a sort of an angled edge up here in the front. I believe I have that in one of our backdrop items. So let's select this backdrop item in item selection mode. We can U for unhide, so we can see that. And go back to that left view or right view. There we can see it. Now I'm not seeing that geometry underlaid. So there's a couple of things. Let's go to the left view. I can't see that geometry. Let's go to our right view backdrop item. I can change that projection type from right to left. There we go. Now I can see it here. Now I'm not seeing it underneath my geometry. It's kind of invisible to me. Let's go to our viewport options. We'll go down to our drawing and control settings under background imagery, and we're going to say overlay. That way we'll be able to see that as we're working. Excellent. So now we just need to make sure that this body panel comes up to here and goes down, which should be pretty easy to do. And then all we need to do is bring this panel down to the frame and no lower. We don't need for it to do the bottom piece. That's a separate thing. So let's get started here. Now I'm going to grab the topology pen. And because this stuff is sort of going a different direction than the stuff down here, we have a decision to make. So we could shift right drag and do loops that go sort of like this all the way around, and then we would never need to create any poles. We can make this all go straight out in sort of a radial pattern so that this stuff comes out like I'm showing here. And this will work okay. This is not a terrible way to go. But what you really want on especially something like a car body where you want this to look like a rolled surface, it really needs to be consistent and almost a ruled surface like this one. You really want for these grid rows to follow the shape of the car body as much as possible. So really I want to have nice long straight rows that come straight down here rather than a radial fan coming out from this loop in the middle. But in order to do that, we're going to introduce some poles into our geometry. There's just no way around it. We definitely will. There's no way to avoid that. But what we can do to make it look better, see, those poles are areas where we diverge, right? So let me just show you an example here. This is what we call a pole, right here, where we have 5 edges coming into a single point. Now, the reason poles are inevitable is because they are what allow us to sort of change directions with our topology. By doing this, I've allowed myself to now create 2 sets of edge loops that go around in different directions, and they meet up at this point. The problem with poles is that they don't smooth beautifully. As I showed you in a previous video, Pixar sub-Ds make a huge difference here in improving the quality of the smoothing on these poles. But still, it's never going to be perfect. They're always going to be slightly problematic, so you definitely want to hide them as much as is possible. The way to hide a pole is to put it somewhere flat and inconspicuous. Right here is probably a good place for us because it's in a fairly flat part of the body. Let me show you another way that we could do this that would cause more problems. If I put it, say, right here, come out this way, come out that way, and then go down like this, and connect up this way, here is our pole. Now, this one is probably okay because it's going to be hidden up underneath this lip when it gets rolled around, and you probably won't really be able to see it. But if I did it this way, connect this up, then diverge here, and then we connect, and then you'd be going like this, basically. Then this is not ideal. This is not going to be great because you can see that if we look in 3 dimensions, this is where our hood starts to curve upward. And the further up we get this on this curve, the more acute that curve becomes, the worse the smoothing will be in this area. This smoothing is not going to work well if it's on a curved area of our model. So what I'm going to do is move this down to a very flat area of our model, right in here, where the curvature is minimal and therefore the effect of that pole on that curvature is going to be minimal as well. Okay, so let's take this guy and move it down. I'll pull this guy down also. Something like that. Get those the way we want them. And I could actually even diverge one further down. I'll right drag, shift right drag to get that whole edge loop. Pull this down. And then get these sort of running around in the correct direction. Then we can diverge this way. We'll diverge right here and right here. And get those lined up. And then snap that down. And now we've created a pole, yes, but it's in a very inconspicuous area. This is a flat area. There's not much curvature. You're really almost certainly not going to notice that. So let's move these guys over to where we want them. I'll right drag to pull this entire edge loop up, and then shift right drag to pull down a copy of it straight down here. Looks like we're getting some snapping trouble down there. So I'm just going to pull this down manually until we start having problems. There we go. Right about there. Let's pull this stuff back. And this way, we should be able to finish this up fairly quickly. There's a quick turn here, so let's hold the Shift key, pull this guy out 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And then I can Shift right drag to pull this down, snap it, Shift right drag, and Shift right drag to snap those into place. It's going to get us pretty close. Go up to perspective view. Definitely want to pull these forward some. And then shift right drag on this edge to get this up. Sometimes if points don't snap automatically, you just have to manually do them by dragging a vertex. There we go. That looks pretty good. Let's go to the left view here. Oh, I see. Looks like we're snapping to that wheel. Because we have the wheel visible, it's that's why we were having snapping issues earlier. So let's go back to item mode. Select this body topo, body panels, Shift H to hide unselected. Go back to poly mode, select the body panels. And now if I go back to my left view, now my snapping should work better. That's better. Yeah, that's more like it. Okay. Almost done. Let's shift right drag this guy back. snap that in. Now we have a choice up here. We can either add a quad right here. Oops. Let's zoom in here a little bit. Add a quad here, connect that in there, and then move our way down. But that's creating a pole right here. And so we sort of have a choice. We could also just go back with these and then snap this up and let this stuff kind of be a little bit uneven. And then shift right drag this back. Now this stuff is going to snap to this other mesh, so let me hide that. Select it, H for hide, go back to my topology pen, shift right drag to pull this forward, drop the tool, U for unhide, and there we go. Now that's pretty decent, and when I smooth that out, this area here is not ideal, but because it's in a flat area, we're probably not going to see it. The only other thing I want to think about here is that I'm seeing a lot of very wide polygons here. So I'm going to Alt-click, or Alt-C, I should say, to create a loop slice there. Alt-C to create a loop slice here. And that should help us out a little bit. Just keep in mind that we do need to then adjust the topology because this is going to end up being very flat in those areas. Probably just want to tweak those around until they look the way we want them to. Now, there is one other thing that kind of bugs me about this, and that is that it's not totally even, right? These edge loops aren't super even. There's a big one here, small ones here, and also these ones over here are a little bit helter-skelter. So I'm going to select 3 of these edges and delete them, and then I can delete this edge, delete this edge, delete this edge, and now we can kind of add them back in, but manually this time, so that we get exactly what we want. So I'll select these guys, Alt-C for loop slice, and click in the viewport, and I'll set the count to 3, so I get 3 of those edges. Now, these are coming sort of the wrong way, though, so let's hit W for move, then head to our, let's go to our model tools, mesh constraint, background, and as soon as we enable that with the geometry constraint set to point, then suddenly the move tool will be operating with that background constraint turned on, and now we'll see that those verts are snapped right to the surface, and now we have nice even quads. Now I can come in here with my loop slice tool, or edge slice tool I should say, and just click there, shift click here, click there, shift click here, click there. Now we have our nice even edge loops right in there, and I want to do the same thing up here. So I'll come down here to where these are. Let's delete those edges for the moment. And then delete these. Re-add them back in. Select these edges. W for move. And if we turn on our background constraint, then those are going to snap to the surface. So we know those are right where we want them. Now we just hook them back in using edge slice. That's giving us a much cleaner, more even result, and I'm pretty happy with it. So let me just double check that this stuff is right where I want it. And I think we're good. That's probably about all we need to do for now. We can adjust this stuff a little bit later on once we get the other patches in place.